Baby, here I go, start the show. Beat on my heart, now about to explode. I'm about to explode. Feel good, what I'm feeling.
Well, good evening, everyone. Happy Thursday, actually happy Friday Eve. I'm excited to be with you for another episode of Ignite Your TruSelf. I'm Ericka Sallee. I am your host for this conversation, and I'm excited because this is a topic that I think will be a benefit to many. It has been one for me, and I'm still learning and growing through the topic. But before we get to that, I do want to take this opportunity to welcome you to this conversation. And if by chance this is the first time that you are joining me, then I do want to take this opportunity to not only welcome you, but to take a moment to introduce myself as a speaker, a self-help author, and transformation success coach. I get super excited to help my clients, women, and organizations figure out what stands in the way of their success. And then, of course, moving beyond those barriers to figure out how to create the best and truest version of yourself. And so these conversations on Ignite Your TruSelf every week, live streaming from Facebook, YouTube, and LinkedIn, helps to get you just one step closer to whatever that truest version looks like. Now, these are just little, I like to call them little sparks, to just give you enough energy, give you enough of a push to keep moving on to the next, okay? And so before we get started for tonight, I do want to remind you to use the hashtag Ignite Your TruSelf as you are joining me on this evening. Hopefully you are here with me live, but if you happen to come back and see the replay, I do want you to either hashtag Ignite Your TruSelf while you are here or when you come back to see the replay. And I also want to be clear that it is Ignite Your TruSelf, TruSelf, no E. And so do use the hashtag to let folks know what you have been up to on this Friday Eve. So listen, I love the fact that we are still celebrating Women's History Month. Yes, it is Women's History Month. It's also March Madness. For those of you who get into college basketball, this is the time. And let me tell you, if you did a bracket like I did, and you saw any of the games today, you already know that your bracket might just be busted already. I know mine is. And so I get excited about this time of year because I love sports. And I also love the fact that we are celebrating Women's History Month. I said it last week. I'll say it again. I will continue to say that even though the calendar says it's Women's History Month, we know that women will continue to make history even when this month is over. But tonight I do want to share one specific kudos and acknowledgement to Amanda Gorman. Amanda became the youngest inaugural poet in 2021 when she read her poem, The Hill We Climb, at President Joe Biden's inauguration. And I'm excited to say that I do have my copy, compliments of my dear friend Colette Coakley, who shared this book with me and a couple of other women. It is a treasure. And I'm excited not just to know the part of history that she played back in 2021, but I'm also excited to see what more she will do as a powerhouse voice that we so desperately need during these times. And I gotta really be honest with you before we get into the topic. You know, I have said this on my other social media platforms. I'll share it here on the show before we get into the conversation, that I kind of check myself out of the news cycle for a number of different reasons. One, it's just so much and it weighs on me, as I'm sure it does you. And I saw a couple things come through my feed today that really disturbed me. And I just think about, in particular, lots of things going on in Mississippi, the death of a young man, Rasheem Carter, and just hearing the details of that just literally made me want to throw up. And when I heard the details, I realized that we are in a time where collective voices, collective reasoning, and most importantly, change still needs to happen. And I do believe that because it's Women's History Month, that we have the opportunity to keep plugging along to make this world not just a better place for us in the moment, but for the generations that will come behind us. And it is my hope and my prayer that we move beyond this level of toxicity that we are in and have been in a really long time. And I do believe events of the past recent years have really kind of stoked the embers of some of the things that we really, really, really want to do away with. And so women are still here doing amazing things. And I do believe that collectively our voices will continue to do the much needed work to keep us moving on in a good place. So kudos to you, Amanda Gorman, for putting out the wonderful energy into the world then and what you will continue to do in the future. So let's go ahead and jump right into the topic for tonight. Tonight's topic is 3 important things that you can learn about failure. Now, you will notice that the word failure is in quotes, and I'm going to talk about that in just a moment. So here's the thing. I realized that lots of times when things don't go the way that we planned, something turns out completely differently and really causes us to scratch our heads, we have a tendency to beat ourselves up when those things don't go according to plan. I can tell you I have done it, and I'm sure you have too. And when we do that, really what we fail to remember is, number one, that we are human. There is no perfect being that walks the face of this earth. There are things that we do, things that we say, things that we think about that sometimes people don't even know. There are things that we do as a result of the things that we think about that come across like really ugly and nasty and inappropriate. There are things that we might sit back and look over the course of our professional career, our personal relationships, and we think about the things that we've done where we've fallen short. And the reality is that every single one of us, that means you, that means me, we all are going to make mistakes, right? We're all going to say or do something that is not pleasing to us, not the way we wanted to come across. There's lots of different things, right? And so when we think about that, I want to share quickly tonight, what is it that we can take away from this thing called failure? What is it that we can begin to think about when we leave this conversation? And before I do that, I do want to ask you a really quick question. And that is, in this moment, right here, right now, are you holding on to something that perhaps you may have said, something that you may have done? It could have happened just before you listened to this conversation. It could have happened yesterday, maybe last week, last year, maybe even years ago. And you may be sitting there like still literally beating yourself up for that one thing or those multiple things. So if that is you, I just want you to type it in the comments and say, yeah, yep, been there, done that, doing it right now. So what do you have to share with me? Well, I'm glad you asked that question. So let's talk about the first thing to think about when we say, okay, there are 3 things that I need to walk away from this conversation understanding about failure. What would that be? Well, the first thing would be to simply reframe failures and think of them as lessons, okay? Reframe failures and think of them as lessons. So when you say, oh gosh, and here's the thing, here's what I know to be true. we constantly, like, we might just continue to beat ourselves up. Like, you might hear yourself saying, or you may have said aloud, or you've heard other people say, oh my gosh, I'm so stupid. Oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Oh my gosh, like, I'm the dumbest person in the world. Like, I have heard that from people over and over and over and over. I have said, oh my gosh, I can't believe I did that. Years ago, when I started my business, I was in the process of getting ready for the launch event. And I had gone through all the things. I had gotten the articles done. My name was recorded. I had the invitations for the launch event. I had put out all this information with the name of my business. And I'm driving home one day and I get a phone call, and I didn't recognize the number. So I answered the phone. Now, today, if I don't recognize the number, typically I don't answer, because there's a whole lot of robocalls and people trying to scam you on different things. So today I don't answer the phone as much if I don't recognize the number. But back then, I answered the phone. So when I pick up the phone, on the other end of the phone was the voice of an attorney. And the attorney politely said to me that, long story short, the name that I had for my business was something that I could not use because I was on the verge of trademark infringement. Now, when I tell you, I could hear it, and I thought to myself, oh my gosh. Here I was, a little way away from the launch. Invitations were about to go out, like all the things. I had filed my business name, and I did not do diligence to make sure that it was okay. All right. And I did. I beat myself up. I came home at the time in this very office. My husband and I were still together at the time, and I shared with him, and I literally broke down and I cried like a baby. And I'm saying to myself, how in the world did this happen? How did I let this happen? There was something that I was supposed to do that I didn't do. I didn't check all the boxes. I didn't know. I thought all the I's were dotted, all the T's were crossed. I thought I did my search, and apparently I did not do enough of a search. And I did. I beat myself up because I thought, I'm smarter than that. Why didn't I know that? What made me not do all the things that I was supposed to do? And so I remember my husband said at the time, he said, okay, it's okay for you to cry it out, be mad, do what you got to do. He said, but go back to the drawing board. And I thought, oh gosh. So in this tip, reframe the failure as a lesson, I literally had to, like, cry it out. And then I had to go back to the drawing board. And the lesson in that was, okay, there was something that you did not do. And so now you know that when you go back to the drawing board, you've got to check the box this time that you did not check before. Okay. So tip number one, reframing the failure. I truly, 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 truly felt like a failure because, I'm like, well, why didn't I know that? Now, you have to understand too that in the beginning phases of starting anything that you're not familiar with completely and it's new to you, understand that there are things that you might not know. And it's probably 100% true that you won't know all the things. And so I had to say that to myself, and I had to recognize, okay, that was something that was a quote unquote failure, but I had to figure out how to turn it around and use it as a lesson. That lesson in the moment was there was something that you missed. Just acknowledge that and know that going forward, that's the box that you need to check. All right. So there may be something for you right now that you're saying, oh my gosh, I'm a failure. That failed. Oh, that, how can I? And the reality is that, okay, that is a lesson. So even swap out using the word failure and say, okay, there's a lesson. Okay. Which takes me then to tip number two. Tip number two is to then ask yourself, What are you supposed to get from the lesson? Now, notice I said not the failure, but the lesson. What am I supposed to get from the lesson? All right. So right now, and I'm only gonna share a little bit of this because you'll hear more about this in the coming months, but I'm working on book number 2 as we speak. There's a section in the book where I talk about how I felt like a failure because my marriage was failing. And so when I think about what I was supposed to get from that lesson, I had to move away from the notion of feeling like a failure. And I had to understand that in the thing that I was supposed to get was some of the things that I was afraid of in terms of being on my own, that the lesson, what I was getting from the experience was, well, wait a minute, you're able to do things on your own and you will survive and it will be okay. So what I needed to get was sort of like putting my own thoughts aside and my own feelings and emotions about me being a failure because this thing didn't work. And I had to say, the thing that I'm supposed to get is the understanding, the knowledge that it's going to be okay. I'm supposed to get an understanding of what's possible when I lean into my faith. I'm supposed to get this knowing of being surrounded by support and love and all of those things. So when you think about the lessons that you are gaining from the things that don't go your way, the question really is, okay, am I supposed to get something from this? And what is that? There has to be something in this that I'm supposed to take away from this situation. Even in, let's say, and I'm going to go back to a work example, and you get to fill in the blank with whatever example makes sense for you, but I'm just using a couple of personal examples and I'll throw this example out too. So let's say, for instance, you're working on a project at work and there's something that doesn't really go according to plan. Let's say you were supposed to have a communication that goes out to X amount of customers, and somehow, some way, there's a pocket of folks that are missed. And so when you look back and you say, okay, that is a lesson. Notice I didn't say failure. Again, that's a lesson that we're supposed to learn. So what am I supposed to get from this lesson? So maybe in this example, with the pocket of people who didn't get the communication, the question is, oh, well, what am I supposed to get from this? Well, I'm supposed to get from this that we should have done a little bit more extensive research to figure out or make sure that we had all the populations accounted for. Maybe we were supposed to be sure to check our databases where we have certain customers listed. And if this group was not included in that database, and we know that we were supposed to reach out to them and include them in this communication, well, now we're supposed to add them to this communication. So what we're supposed to get from it are specific steps or specific lessons. Oh, I should have done that a little bit differently. Oh, I should have taken more time with that. Oh, I should have communicated more, or I should have had this conversation. Or maybe I should have taken a pause and listened to someone else's point of view before I jumped in and added my own conversation, and it caused a little bit of a ruckus. I'm supposed to get, next time I'll just hold my peace for a moment and allow the conversation to evolve, allow the person to have their opinion, get their perspective out, and then I get to share. That's what I'm supposed to get from it. The next time I do, then I'll do differently. Or the next time I'm faced with that same situation, here is what I'll do differently or what I'll do better. So this tip is all about saying to yourself, what is it? If failure is not failure and it is a lesson, then this tip is about, okay, well, what am I supposed to get from the lesson? What is it that I'm supposed to learn from it? A lot of companies do this when there's projects that are implemented at the end of the phase of the project, when it goes live or when things are available. Some teams will go back and do a lessons learned and say, okay, what worked? because the next time we're going to keep doing that. What didn't work, okay, then that means we have to put a different plan in place so that we can do it better the next time. That's what this tip is about. Ask yourself, what are you supposed to get from the lesson? Now, the third tip might be the most important of all three. And that is to not only ask what you're supposed to get from the lesson, which would imply what are you supposed to internalize? What are you supposed to learn from it? Tip number 3 says to ask yourself what you're supposed to give as a result of or from the lesson. I want to say that again. What am I supposed to give? So what that means is if this thing that didn't go right was a lesson, and I'm supposed to say, okay, in that thing, what am I supposed to get from it? What am I supposed to learn? What am I supposed to do differently? What am I supposed to keep doing that did work? Like, what is it? Or if you consider it a failure, you might say, well, it didn't work. So really want to focus on what feels like it didn't go so well. So let me be clear about that. So this tip says, okay, now that I've gotten what I'm supposed to get, what I'm supposed to learn, now what am I supposed to give? Am I supposed to share this out with someone so that if they come across the same kind of situation, that they can take the lesson that I learned and then they can apply it so they don't make the same mistake? Or, and here's the thing, when I talked about thinking about my failed marriage as a failure for me, now I'm saying to myself, so what am I supposed to give? And my giving back is sharing the story in the book so that if other people in the same situation are beating themselves up and feeling like a failure, they can understand how important it is not to do that. Because just because something didn't quite work out the way you planned or you intended certainly does not mean that you are a failure. Because you can probably pinpoint, let's just say if there's one thing in particular that, so I'll say it this way. So you see I have my hand is up, five fingers showing right now. So if you say, oh my goodness, this worked, this worked, this worked, but these 2 things didn't, then look at the other 3 things that you have that actually did work in your favor. You did do right. You did say right. And even if you say, okay, what if I have 5 things up and this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work, this didn't work, but this one did. And you might say, but only one thing worked. Well, guess what? That one thing is enough to celebrate, which means that if one thing worked, then failure is not even part of the vocabulary. It's just, here are 4 other lessons. Okay, 4 other lessons that I'm supposed to say, all right, what am I supposed to get from these 4 things that didn't quite go right? And then what am I supposed to give out? Now, you might also say, well, hold up those same 5 fingers. Well, guess what? This didn't work. 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 So now what? Well, what I would say is now there are 5 lessons that you then say, all right, what am I supposed to get from all of these things that just didn't go right? So you're repeating the same tips over and over and over, whether you have 1 or more things that didn't work, or whether you have a whole slew of things that didn't work. But I guarantee you, even if there's a whole slew of things that didn't, there's something you can find in the mix where you say, okay, all right, that did work. So it kind of dispels the myth that, well, if all these didn't work, that I'm such a failure, because there's something you can probably pinpoint to say, all right, well, I give myself a pat on the back for that. So that's a myth that we sometimes hold on to. We say, oh gosh, because all that didn't work, then that means I don't work. And that is so far from the truth. All right. So let's quickly go back through the 3 tips first to reframe failures. And instead of saying, oh my gosh, I failed, oh my gosh, I'm a failure, you say, oh my goodness, okay, that didn't go well, didn't quite work out the way I'd intended, but it's a lesson. I'm going to treat it as a lesson. So when I reframe and I take the word failure out of my vocabulary, then I start to think differently about how to approach the things that don't go so well. Tip number 2 is to ask what you are supposed to get from the lesson. Remember, this tip is all about what you are internalizing, what you are learning for yourself, new insight, new perspective, new focus, a new approach. Those are the things that specifically impact you directly and what you are taking away from that lesson. And then the third tip, asking what you're supposed to give from the lesson, is all about now putting it out into the world, now sharing it, now giving someone else the perspective that you've had, the experience that you've had, the lesson that you've taken away, to say, hey, this is how I processed it. I want to share with you. You get to use it, do what you need to do with it, but I just want to give it to you for your consideration. All right. So, and I think there's a concept that you may often hear about, and it is called failing up. Okay. And failing up is all about this concept where we look at the things where we fall short on, where we make the mistakes, and we say, okay, how can I, in the moments where you feel like things don't go well, you feel like you're like on the ground. You feel like, oh my gosh, I've fallen short. And you feel like, oh gosh, how am I going to get up from this? And it is about failing up or lessening up, because then what you're doing is saying, okay, I can move through this thing and I can look at what I'm supposed to get from it. And as I keep moving up, I'm like, oh, not only am I getting, but now I get to give. Because at the end of the day, I'll say this as we wrap up. At the end of the day, the experiences that we have are not just for us. The experiences that we have are not just for us to take the lessons for us, but it is intended for us to share, to be a blessing, to help someone else. Because our journey may be, and the lessons that we learn from our journey may very well be the things that will help someone else transform their lives and move along the way in their journey as well. Okay. So that's how that works. So I'm going to wrap up for tonight's conversation. I do want to say this to you. You know, a lot of times when, and especially women, you know, this is Women's History Month. A lot of times as women, we are trying to carve out that thing that is specifically designed for us, whether that's a dream or a goal that you have, and it can be on a very on varying levels and scales, right? Somebody's dream and goal might feel like it's this small, and somebody else's dream or goal might feel like it's totally big. So whatever that is for us as women, however, whatever we're approaching, whatever we're going after, whatever we're trying to do, or in the moments where we're so afraid that we don't want to try, we don't want to go forward, or we're sitting in spaces and we have a certain hat that we're wearing and we're supposed to show up for people, but we're perhaps looking at ourselves as, oh gosh, but wait, I made a mistake before and I didn't quite do that well before. So if I'm sitting in this place and I want to own all of what I bring to the table, but I'm still holding on to the failure, then we're really limiting ourselves from possibility. If you've been here with me before, if you've seen any of my conversations on other platforms, you know that I've talked about this multiple times, that these barriers are the things that hold us back from being the amazing women that we are called to be. And so if you sit there and you say to yourself, yeah, there are times when I be holding back on myself and I'm trying to figure out, am I good enough? I failed too much. Can I show up and be successful in this area when I didn't do so well? And I've fallen and I'm trying to figure out how to navigate myself through. Well, if that's you, then I'm going to invite you to be a part of my information night for the Bold, Brilliant Boss Leaders program for female leaders. There are 2 information times. I was going to say nights, but one of them is in the evening, one of them is during the day, for this program. So the first is March the 21st, which is just around the corner, next Tuesday from 7 to 8 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. And then the second information session is March the 22nd from 12 to 1 p.m. So I'm going to invite you to register for one of these sessions. It's the same session, just being offered at two different times to accommodate people's schedules. But you get to hear the details about the program, and you get to figure out where you are right now in your journey and kind of pinpointing. And you can probably pinpoint some of the things in your mind right now as you're hearing me talk about this, those things that you might be saying to yourself that's holding you back. This is all about owning who we are and being bold enough to sit in the room, sit in the spaces, and to use our brilliance, all the smarts and the experience that we bring to the table. All of that is what helps us to be boss, okay? To own it. Let me give you a really quick example. So I had an email exchange going back and forth with someone a couple days ago, and the person kept spelling my name wrong. My name is spelled Ericka. And so the person, kept spelling it Erika. And so at first I was like, okay. But then I got to the point where I said, I want the person to spell my name correctly because I think that that's important. So I looked at the email and I finally said, by the way, just want to let you know, the correct spelling of my name is Ericka as opposed to Erika. I wanted to be bold in saying that. And you might be saying to yourself, oh, well, that's such a small thing. But do you recognize that when we decide to be bold in the small areas, then that gives us fuel, igniting your true self, to take other bold steps. And sometimes the boldest steps that we take are the smallest. And so that's just one small example, but I wanted to share it because sometimes we shrink back and we're like, oh, no, I'm not going to say anything. It's okay. And it really isn't, or it might not be. And so that's just one example. So if you're saying to yourself, yeah, there's a lot of times when I probably could use my voice, be a little stronger, speak up for myself, advocate for myself, bold, brilliant boss leaders. So I want you to think about where you are right now and whether you're shrinking back and holding out on yourself and you're not really showing up to be the fullest, the best, the brilliant, most brilliant version of yourself. If that is you, then yes, register for one of the two information sessions. I have posted the registration links and I will repost them again. There's still time to register. So I'm going to just again invite you to be a part of the information session. And it does not cost you anything except the hour of time. Okay. The hour of time, get the information you need, and then you walk away and you say, okay, let me make some decisions about where I am right now and where I want to go. The last thing that I'm going to say is that if you have any questions that are specific to you before you register for one of the two sessions, then I do invite you to visit my website, trusynergy.org. There is an opportunity to reach out to contact me. You can set up a discovery session, which is all about you. You might say, yeah, you know what? I've heard lots of conversation during Ignite Your True Self. There have been things that I've walked away with, some aha moments. I'm trying to figure out where it fits for me. And I just want to have a conversation about what is next for me. Then feel free to reach out at trusynergy.org, and then we can have a conversation that is specific to you. Finally, you can also follow me on LinkedIn at Ericka Sallee. You can follow me on Instagram at TruSynergy_, and all of my social media handles and things you can also find on my website. You can also find those on my link tree, which gives you everything, and that's flowing at the bottom of your screen. If you happen to be seeing this on YouTube, then I do encourage you to subscribe to the channel, go ahead and share it out, and then turn the notification bell on so that you are in the know when new videos are uploaded. So next week's conversation, I'm going to say stay tuned. I've got this calendar of topics, and when I looked at the topic for next week, I thought I might want to change that around a little bit, and I'm not sure which of the other topics I'm going to pull from and kind of switch some things around. And so I decided I'm not going to try to rush and figure it out for tonight's conversation. I'm going to say stay tuned. Be on the lookout for the announcement for next week's show, and I will have the topic ready for you then. But tonight, I'm just going to let it sit for a minute, and I will figure out what I'm going to swap out and what I'm going to talk about next week. So, on that note, I'm glad that you had an opportunity to sit in with me. Let me just take a quick moment to acknowledge any comments. There she is. There she is. Yes, there is a link, and I will repost the link for those sessions once this is over. So there's a couple things there. It's all through my feed. I've reposted it this week, but I will definitely make sure that you get that link. So if you're interested in registering for that, and also share it out with your circle of women friends that you may be having conversations with, and everybody's trying to figure out everything all together all at one time, and you might just be saying, what? So yes, I will make sure that you get that link. Okay. So listen, thank you so much for joining the conversation. I do appreciate you. I look forward to seeing you all again real soon. But until I do, I want you to take care of yourselves, and yes, be well. Have a good evening, and I'll see you back again on next week.